How you guys doing today? This is Gilbert with Interactive Utopia, and today I want to talk to you about the Spotify Web API. It's a great API so that you can access your Spotify account as well as the Spotify database so that you can retrieve information from them. First of all, I just want to give a brief introduction. As I mentioned, my name is Gilbert. I'm with Interactive Utopia. You can go to interactiveutopia.com. If you need any assistance with your projects, send me a message and it will be my pleasure to assist you. Going back to the Web API. There is multiple references or documentation that you can access so that you can learn a little bit more about how to use this API. Basically, the main understanding that you need to have is that you need to authenticate with the user's Spotify account so that you're able to retrieve their account information, and there is a SDK so that you can create a Spotify player in your application if you desire so, but it's only going to work for users that have a Spotify premium account. Okay, they will not work for the free accounts. So first of all, if you like, I'm gonna give you an example of what we're gonna be working with today. I'm just creating a simple application where you're gonna be able to log in with your Spotify account via the Spotify Web API, and then once the user is logged in, they can retrieve their top 20 songs that they like to listen to and their top 20 artists that they like to listen to. In this case, they're gonna be from my account. Once we retrieve them, we're gonna be using the Spotify Player SDK to be able to play some of those songs right from our browser. Okay, so let's give it a try. First of all, we gotta log in the user. So the user has to start the interaction. They click on the button, then they have to approve the scope that we are requesting from them, so that we can use it in Spotify. Once it agrees, then again we make the API calls to get the top 20 songs from the artist and the top 20 artists. The top 20 songs for the user and the top 20 artists for the user as well. And then, for the top 20 users, we can open them in Spotify and then, find the song that we want to play it from there. Or for the top 20 songs, since we can get a direct URL for that song, we can also listen for the song inside of the player. Okay, inside of the browser. And we can log out to destroy our session. We can toggle play, so play it, pause it. Overall, simple application, but again, with the Spotify API, you have a lot of power behind that code. So as I mentioned, Spotify for Developers website, they have a ton of documentation. I would highly suggest that you go over and take a look at it. The web API is what we're going to be using today, but if you go under the documentation, they have different APIs. The web playback SDK, we're going to be using that as well today. But also, if you're making your application for iOS, for an iOS device or for an Android device, they have widgets, or maybe if you're doing some hardware like the next new Alexa, there's ways of integrating Spotify in there as well. Okay. When you go to the documentation, two very important pages that you need to know about. That is the authorization guide and the endpoints. If we open the endpoints, it's going to provide us with all the information that we're going to be able to retrieve from the Spotify Web API. For example, if we go to user, then you can get the current user profile, or if you go to playlist, you can get the playlist that is being played on. You can search for songs. You can take control of the user's players. You get the user top items. We're going to be using that today to find the top 20 artists and songs from the user. So again, you can read all of that in their documentation. Now if we go back to this page, and as well, the other important section is going to be the authorization guide. There's a process. You have to use OAuth 2.0 in order to log in the user. As you saw, the process right now is basically where you create the user clicks on a button, creates a request. It goes over to Spotify, and Spotify does the actual authentication of the user, and then they'll just send us a code so that we can retrieve an access token. If you go to the authorization code flow, then it pretty much tells you, you gotta request the data, you gotta display the scopes, that's on their Spotify. He needs to log in or authorize it. Then we get the code, we need to get the access token and refresh token, and then from there on, we can use that token, or if it expires, we can as well refresh it. And then down here it gives you all the information you need about, this is the first part of the request. You need to send the get method to authorize with these variables in there. Once you retrieve that, then you gotta request the access token. You gotta make a post request to API/token with these variables as well, and that's what's gonna finally give you the access token, and this is pretty much what you're gonna be receiving, and they give you some explanation about them, and even if you want to refresh your token, how to do that. So again, it's a lot of information. They're very thorough. Some people find it a little bit complicated just because it's so much information, but do know that if you have a question, most likely it's going to be on the documentation. So make sure to go and take a look at that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the code. Get that out of the way. All right. So we all start with the index file. Basically, what I do in my application, the first thing that I do is to make sure that a user is logged on. I do that by using the session on the server to store the variables for the access token. So this is for the callback. Sorry, I had the wrong file open. Here we go, index. As I mentioned, so the first thing that we do is we check for the session to have stored a Spotify token in there. If it has not, then we need to redirect the user to the correct page, which in this case is the home page. We are setting it up as includes. You're gonna see a lot of includes in my files. That just means all the code I put it on a separate document, and that just makes it a little bit cleaner and a little bit more efficient for me to find what we need to do. So again, we check. If we already have the token, we go to the dashboard. If we don't, then we go to the home page. So let's go ahead and open the home page so that you can see how everything starts. Very simple. Let's go ahead and take a look on the application. Let's log out. So all we have is the logo image and the button, the button in there. So if we go to Visual Studio Code, you can see right here, I'm including the header and the footer. We reuse it a couple of times, so I just, a little bit easier. It's faster when you can reuse your code. So we include the header and the footer, and then we're just adding the middle section, which in this case we have a container div, which just has the logo on top, as I mentioned, and then the bottom right underneath it, which on click it's going to call the user login request function, which is right below. On this function, all we're doing at the end of the day is a window.open request. That's basically just a redirect for a JavaScript redirect, where the user, they're going to click on it and they're going to go to certain page. And what we're actually building, it's the URL where we're sending that user to. As I mentioned in the documentation, it tells you exactly the parameters that you need to send and where to send them. So if you need a little bit more information, you can go to this section right here. But I just want to show you again. We need to send the client ID, which I have stored that as a private key. Once you create your application. So first and foremost, I forgot to totally mention this one. You need to go to dashboard and create an application. I need to log back in. But once you create that application, you're gonna go in there. You're gonna create the application, and it's gonna give you a application key and a client secret key. You need to store those in your application, and you're going to be using them multiple times, so maybe store them in a variable, but they are secret to you. That's what gives you access to the server, so make sure that nobody knows them and that you don't post them anywhere. All right, so you need to send your client ID, which is given to you by Spotify. Response type, it's just code, that's in the documentation. Your redirect URL, that's something that when you create your application you need to set in the settings as well, but basically it's just the page where the user is going to be sent back once they authorize your page, and then that's where you're going to be handling, you know, the token request, or if they didn't approve, then you need to send an error, something like that. But that's basically the page they're sending the user after they answer, you know, what if they agree or not to the scope that you're requiring. Then underneath I'm adding the scope that I'm requesting from Spotify. This is a little bit different from most APIs. They are space separated. Usually they're comma separated, but in this scenario they're space separated. You can go, there's a page on the Spotify documentation where it gives you all the different scopes, and then you can just add them as needed. The last section that I'm adding it's called show dialog, and that's just basically saying, do you want the user to confirm that he's authorizing your application every single time? That's true. If you just wanted to do it once and then every time after that they just get like they click login and they just go straight to your application, then you can put false. And you know, I always like to add console logs, you know, to debug if there's any issues. In this scenario I'm commenting it out, but you know, if you want to know exactly what this looks like, you can also always log it and make sure that there's no issues. But once you get that URL, then again, as I mentioned, once the user clicks on that button, they're gonna get redirected to this URL, which is just basically a Spotify page where they're gonna, you know, approve or deny your application. All right, so let's take a look at how that works. So you go to the application, you log in, takes you to Spotify, then you gotta agree, and then it's gonna take you back to the application. So let's see how that callback section works. It's the page I had open a little bit before. Basically, once the user gets sent back to our application, the first thing that I'm doing is I'm checking to see if I got a code in the URL. Usually if there's a code in there, that means that the user has been authenticated, and they're sending you that authorization code back so that you can retrieve the token, you know, by validating it with the server. So if I did receive a code in the URL, then I am including the request login file, which is this one right here. The request login file, all it does is it takes that code that we received from Spotify, makes a curl request over to Spotify again, and but you know, server side, and that's how we're gonna be getting the actual access token. A lot of the times they don't send the access tokens in the URL because it's not secure. If somebody just goes in there and puts code whatever, you know, they might be able to get access to your application. But this is a 2-layer protection where we get a code that is, you know, not as secure, but then we use that code in the backend to retrieve the actual secure token. All right, so again, we're just using curl. At the top, I'm including my require files. These are just my variables, you know, the application ID, secret IDs, things like that. I'm requiring my curl class. It's just something that I created to make it a little bit more convenient. You can take a look in the GitHub files to, you know, take a look at it. And I'm almost the only thing that I'm doing is I'm creating a new instance of that curl server. I'm setting up the URL, which again, it's all in the documentation. You know, it's the base URL /API/token, and then I'm sending the required variables that it asked me. Let me go ahead and show you. I believe it's going to be more convenient. Let's go to authorization. Let's open the flow. So we did that section right here. Then we get a code, as you can see, you know, the response, we get a code or a state if we sent one. And with that is what we're going to make our request. So in the request, as I mentioned, it needs to be a post request to API/token. We need to send grant type, which in this case is just authorization code. we need to send the code that we received from Spotify, and we need to send them or redirect URI again, which is where the user gets sent back in case there is any issues. And as they say right here, there's no actual redirection in there. You get it on the back end, so everything gets stored in the back end. And there you do need to send 2 headers along with that request. One is the authorization header, and one is the content type header. So I'll show you how to do that right here. So for the variables, again, we're just setting the post fields, brand type. We're setting up the code that we receive. We're setting up the redirect URL that we have already established. And then we need to set up the headers. For the headers, we need to give that access token back to them. And all that it is just a base 64 encoding of your application client ID and your application client secret, separated by the the 2 dots, the semicolon, I believe it is. So yeah, just make sure use the base 64 encoded. If you just send the text directly, it's not gonna work. So make sure that it is base 64 encoded, and it's a basic authorization. So you need to establish that as well. And as I mentioned, they give you all that right in here: authorization, basic, and then base 64 encoded, and what needs to go in there. Once we have all that information, then we can go ahead and do the curl request. We are doing a post request. We're sending the URL, the post fields, and the access token. And with that, what that's going to do is it's going to give us the user token data, which we are storing in the session, in our server session. Once we have that information stored, then we redirect the user back to the home or to the index file. Once they're back in the index file, as you remember, they're going to check, and it's going to be like, oh, okay, now we have a session. So it's not going to go to the home page, it's going to go to the dashboard, which is this page right here, where we actually see most of the work going on, most of the bulk of the stuff going on. So let's open up the dashboard file, see how that works. Basically, the dashboard file, it's another big curl request section, I guess. The only thing is that we already have the authorization token, so we can go, remember all those call points that I showed you a little bit ago? You can go and use whatever call points you want. So the first thing that I'm doing is I'm making 2 curl calls. Usually 1 per page is the most that you want to do, but again, this is just a simple application, so we want to break it down as much as we can. So we're making 2 requests, one to get the top tracks, one to get the top artist for the user. And the only thing that changes in here, it's the URL, and then we need to send that authorization token via that GET request. So if you go to the application, we go to the endpoints. For example, we use user get user top items. This is basically what we're doing. We're calling out a GET request to me /top/type, and the type, it's either artist or track. If you look at our application, we have 2 different ones, one for tracks, one for artist. There's other optional things that you can send, like a limiter, time range, the offset. That's if you're doing like pagination or something like that. And then it's showing you what the response is, which basically it's going to give you all the information back from that you're requesting. Here's another example. The application, it is a JSON result that you're going to be retrieving, so make sure that you can handle that appropriately as well. So let's go back to the application. So we make the 2 curl get calls. We just need to send the correct URL and our access token. It's going to send us that user, artists, and songs, what their top tracks and artists are. And then from there, we're going to have a big JSON file with all this information, and we just need to go through it and present it to the user in a way that it's a little bit easier for them to understand. In this case, I'm just looping through the results, and I'm just creating the actual content inside of that loop, whatever I want to display. There's way more information that you can provide to the user and that you can retrieve from Spotify. But again, in this case, I just wanted to be able to open the song in Spotify, and I just wanted to play the song in Spotify. So once we did get those GET requests, we loop it through to show it to the customer or to the user, and that's about it. So the loop, we just created a loop to create all this. We added a couple buttons, and that's about it. How to integrate it with Spotify, so that it's able to open it. It's gonna give you all that information on the results that you get. For example, you get the URL where the user clicks on it and it automatically opens Spotify. There's no real science behind that. Where it gets a little bit more complicated is if you want the user to actually play it in the pages search, like in the browser itself. You're gonna see it that I don't have it for artists because you can play an artist. I guess you can play a playlist but not an artist, but you can definitely play a song, a song from that artist. So for the top songs, I added that play button in there. The way that it works is I am using the Spotify Playback SDK. You can see they have a reference in there. They have a quick start guide. It's super easy. Just you gotta download some JavaScript code that they already did, and then you gotta initiate the player, and you can add some event listeners to start working with the player itself. But you can even see like the toggle play button that I use. Like I took all this information from here, so it works. If you just want to make it nicer, you can add some icons, things like that. But the functionality behind it, like it's pretty easy to implement. You can see in here, if we try to play a song, it's not connected right now, but it basically will go ahead and play the song from whatever artist you're listening to. So how can we do that? If we go to Visual Studio Code, you can see that in our header, they asked to do it in the footer, like towards the end of the body, but I was having some issues with the implementation of the functions that I was adding. So once I put it in the header, I know it's slower to load, but it's easier to implement. And again, we're not building anything fancy today, so I just wanted to make it work. So we're loading that JavaScript file. I'm sorry, it's up here. We're loading that JavaScript file from the CDN from Spotify. That way, we can get their player, their pre-made player. I'm providing the access token. I have it stored as in my session as in PHP, but I'm just creating a constant in JavaScript and then pulling that PHP value out and posting it into JavaScript. That way it's easier for me to use it in my JavaScript. And then I do have a separate JavaScript file where I'm pretty much taking care of all the code that it's needed. So let's open that up. This is the main file. Basically, this is the code that you saw. We're initiating the player. We are sending the token, our authorization token that we retrieved already to Spotify so that we can get it authorized. And then we add a bunch of listeners, when it's ready, if there's any errors, if it's not ready, and then, besides the listeners, we as well gotta connect. Once we have all of our listeners set up, our basic ones, then we connect to the actual player in Spotify. Once it's connected, it's gonna call the ready function, or the listener that we added, and what that's gonna do, it is gonna connect to the device. So basically, when you initiate the player, it's not going to be connected to it. It's not going to be the one that is primarily being used. So if you try to play something, it might still be on your phone or on your desktop player. There's an easy way. If you go to your desktop player, you can always click on the speaker section underneath, and then you can select the player. The name of the player is going to be set up. Where is that at? you can change the name of the player. Oh, here we go. So when you're setting up, when you're starting to set up your player, this section right here, that's going to be the name of your player, which you can switch between them. But again, since we want the user to be able to interact with it right away, we use the Spotify Web API to, first of all, we retrieve the device ID that it gave us when the player was created, and then we use the Spotify Web API to change to this device ID so that it's the primary one that the user is currently using. You can have the user start playing, or when it initiates to play the song as soon as it initiates, or you can just have it initiate and not start anything. I have it to not start anything. Usually you want the users to start all of the interactions, so we just want to get it set up for them. And then once I set up everything up, I just call the function and it makes that connection. Once you're connected to the actual player and that you're able to use the player, then you can call the function. On all the songs that we pulled from Spotify, I added that button that it allows them to play the song. When you're playing the song, when you're calling that function, all that I need is the URL for that song for Spotify, and then we're able to, once you click it sends the command to the backend on Spotify, and it changes right away the song that the user is playing. So for that, we just make a put request. This is not a get, this is not a post request, this is a put request. And in there, we're just basically sending the URL of the song that we wanted to play. We are sending the token for the user, like the actual authorized user. And once that gets sent, again, it's going to be played by the browser. And yeah, you can just select the songs that you like to play. After that, we are logging the result into the console, but that's just basically for debugging. I'm sorry you can't listen to it right now. I guess since we have the webcam connected, it's not letting it go, but this is basically the way to go about it. So yeah, and that way I kind of showed you how to go in, how to log in with Spotify, how to retrieve the information from Spotify, connect the Web Playback SDK, again, pretty easy, and then use a function to play the song that you want the user to play. This is just very basic, it has not a lot of value, but if you think about it, let's say you're doing a game, or let's say you're doing an application for some type of business, something where you need people to interact, you can always have this connectivity added, and it's just it's what they're listening to every day, so it's an extra plus. It also works as an authentication method, so it's just overall an awesome API. Developer.spotify.com, go take a look at it. If you have any issues, definitely let me know. And that's about it, guys. So once again, I'm Gilbert with Interactive Utopia. If you like this video, please do subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, be sure to leave them in the comment box below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. And of course, if you need any assistance with your projects, that being website, e-commerce, Web3, whatever you need for your project, you need to work with any APIs, Facebook, Twitter, Google, Spotify, then I'm your guy and I should be able to assist you. So make sure to send me a message or give me a call today. You can do that from my website at interactiveutopia.com. Alright guys, so I hope that you like this video, and I'll see you on the next one.